Professor Rad here, and today we're going to talk about bar graphs that use whole numbers. So a bar graph is a graph that's going to use rectangles to convey information. It usually has two axes, a horizontal and a vertical one. And however tall the rectangle or bar is going to indicate the value for the category it represents. So the best way to talk about a bar graph is by looking at one so we can use it as an example. So let's go ahead and do that. So in this example, it says, over time, the number of Americans celebrating Halloween has increased. The bar graph below illustrates how many Americans celebrated Halloween in each of several years. So we can see that in our bar graph, there are a series of bars or rectangles here. And we have a number of years that we are looking at across the bottom. So for example, this green bar is representing the number of Americans who celebrated Halloween in the year 2015. Now over here we have the vertical axis. This is the one that goes up and down, and it's telling us this is the number of Americans in millions. Okay, so be careful when you're reading the numbers. When I see a number like 170, that doesn't mean 170 Americans, it means 170 million Americans. So very often, especially on this vertical axis, you want to pay careful attention to that label, because sometimes it'll be in millions or billions or dollars or inches. Those units are going to be important for us. So if I wanted to do like a quick scan of this before I start answering the questions they asked me, I can use the heights of the bars to at least tell some information, like 2017, on this graph anyway, was the year when the most Americans celebrated Halloween because it's the tallest bar. And then the shortest bars were 2013 and 2015. Those are a little bit harder for me to see which one's exactly taller. It looks like 2015's bar is a little shorter than 2013. So yeah, so that's some quick observations I would make. And then these lines here are to help us match up the number on this axis with the heights of the bars. So like in 2017, there were just a little bit under 180 million Americans who celebrated Halloween, because this bar is just a little bit underneath that 180 million line. While in 2016, there were just over 170 million Americans who celebrated Halloween, because this blue bar is just over that line for 170. So let's go ahead and take a look at the questions we've been asked, and we'll use the graph to answer them. So part A says, in which of the years listed did the most Americans celebrate Halloween? So we actually already answered that one, because the most Americans is represented by the tallest bar. So here's our tallest bar. It's taller than all the others, and that is the year for 2017. There's 2017. Next it says, let me give some space between these. Here. Next it says, approximately how many Americans celebrated Halloween in 2018? So I'm going to go up to 2018. Oh, and this one ends like pretty much right on the line here. So let's follow that line over. And we have 175 million. So approximately 175 million Americans. Then it says approximately how many Americans celebrated Halloween in 2012? Let's come back up to the chart. So here we have 2012. And now this one's a little bit trickier, because the top of this bar is not landing exactly on a line. It's in between the two lines. So here we have 165 and 170. So what I like to do is I like to imagine if I were counting from 165 to 170, where each of those numbers like would fall on here. So for example, I'm going to indicate with my cursor, if this is 165, then probably here would be 166, 167, 168, 169, and then 170. So I would say probably like 168 because it looks like a little bit more than halfway. So maybe 168 million Americans. That seems to be about where it's landing. So that's what I'm going to go with. So about 168 million Americans. So one of the things that can be tough about using a bar graph, especially depending on the scale and the grid lines that are given to you, is it can be sometimes easy to estimate and sometimes a little bit harder to estimate what number this is actually going up to. Okay, now questions D and E are kind of going the other way. So question D says, in which year did 171 million Americans celebrate Halloween? So instead of looking at the year first, I'm going to look at 171 million. So here's my 170. 171 is going to be just above that 170 line. So I'm going to follow this over. And the only bar that is just above it is the blue bar, which is from 2016. So I'm going to say in about 2016. Then for this last question, it says, in which year did 158 million Americans celebrate Halloween? So we'll do the same thing. Now this one, again, it's a little bit tricky. 158 is going to be in between 155 and 160. And what I like to do is I like to count up from 155 to 158, and then count from 158 to 160, just so I get a sense of which one is it closer to. So if I have 155, 56, 57, 58, so that's like 3 away. Then if I have 158, 59, 60, that's only 2 away. So 158 is going to be in between 155 and 160, but a little bit closer to 160. So let's see. In between these two bars, the orange bar ends and the green bar ends. So if I compare where the top of the green bar is to the two lines, it looks like the green bar is a little bit closer to the bottom, while the orange bar is a little bit closer to the top. So I'd said that 158 is a little bit closer to 160. So we want the one that's a little bit closer to the top. So we're going to want the year 2013. So 2013. All right, so there we go. We've answered all our questions about the bar graph. In the next video, we'll also be looking at bar graphs, but then we're going to be looking at bar graphs that have decimals instead of whole numbers. So I hope this was a good introduction to bar graphs for you. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, have a fantastic day.